Lucy, when you start, go ahead and start by saying hello to the online audience and tell them today that they can hear you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Do I have Sonoma? Can you hear me? Great. Thank you, thank you. Michael, Veronica, who else do I see? Angie? And it looks like we have a fourth participant. We'll get introductions here shortly. Can you hear me though? Okay.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Perfect, great. Just checking also, do we have any other participants online? Perfect, great. Hopefully everybody can hear me. We are going to get started here in the next 30 seconds.
Neil just needs to talk to us a bit. Lucy? Lucy? Stop. Stop. Don't move. Give it an inch. Record a little bit. Walk to that side of the podium and go around it. Perfect. I don't want you to.
Okay, good morning. Good morning. How is everyone doing today? Good, good. Great. So I want to welcome you today to our learning communities here. Thank you so much to First 5 Alameda for hosting us today. And also thank you to all our agency partners that are joining us today, as well as our speakers. And also thank you to the Amazing Strategies team, which I couldn't do without. And I also want to have an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. And especially, I know we have our online remote sites. So with that, let's go ahead, and I would like to see who is in the room with us today, and also so our online participants can actually introduce themselves. So let's go ahead and start with, we have a microphone that'll go around. We will have our main hub site introduce themselves first, and then we'll go to our online participants and our Sonoma La Luz partners as well. So,
Hi, I'm Veronica Cole. I work for the East Bay Asian Local Development Corporation. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. And I believe this is your first time.
Yes.
Well, welcome.
Hi, my name is Anna Gwen Simpson. I'm the with Eden Housing.
Great, thank you. And also a first-time participant? Yes. Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Jacobson, and I'm with Aspiranet, and also first time.
First time, wow, many first time, thank you.
Hi, my name is Miriam Saad, and I'm with the Office of Child Abuse Prevention.
Great, thank you, welcome.
Hi, I'm Brenda Diaz. I'm with the Child Abuse Prevention Center, and I manage a coalition for victims of child abuse.
Great, welcome, Brenda.
Hi, I'm Crystal Sand. I'm with Tandem Partners in Early Learning.
Early Learning,
Also
perfect.
my first time.
First time, perfect, great.
Hi, I'm Kylie Thomas. I'm with Safe and Sound, and specifically the San Francisco Family Support Network, and my second time here.
Second time, perfect. We have a veteran, and thank you. And we have our guest presenters as well.
Hi, I'm Fran Bitterman. I work with First 5 Contra Costa, and I staff the Family Economic Security Partnership, which you will hear more about.
Don't think this mic is. Oh, won't hear it. Okay. Hello. My name's Beth Hoke. I'm with First 5 Alameda County. I'm the training administrator here. And hello, Michael.
Good morning. My name is Bill Bankhead. I'm the Spark Point coordinator at Spark Point Contra Costa.
Great. Welcome, Bill.
I'm Judy Sherman. I'm an independent consultant, and I'm here supporting the effort for strategies and all the learning communities across the state. And I want to mention that we have 8 people who are participating online, in addition to the folks in the room there and the room in here. And we will not be able to unmute them, but I want you all to know that they're there and they're listening.
And good morning. My name is Lana Callista. I am the Outreach and Communications Coordinator for Strategies 2.0.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sierra Shelton. I am training program support with Strategies 2.0 team.
And that's everyone we have here in Alameda today.
Great. Can we have our online participants? Can we have Michael let us know who is in Sonoma today? We have La Luz Agency, who is also our first time partner that is joining us from Sonoma County. And La Luz is hosting the remote site. I want to thank La Luz for supporting strategies and also the ongoing learning development for their agency and their partners. So let's go ahead and have Michael, would you let us know who is in the room?
Well, I will introduce one person who will introduce everyone else.
Great, perfect.
Introduce Veronica from here at La Luz. So.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having us here. So, yes, we're here from La Luz in Sonoma. I'm the Associate Executive Director, and we have a few of our team members who are joining. We have Angie, who's our Community Engagement Manager. We have Peter, who's our Business Development Associate, and we have Betsy Chavez, who is our Director for School Programs.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I believe this is also first time for all of you except Michael. So welcome. And we look forward.
Now the image stopped.
Now the video's gone too. We lost it.
We were doing so well for a good 10 minutes.
I guess I could be texting my It might be, we might have to find a site other than First 5 Elements. I think they get so
Can you hear us? You can hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, so can we test, we need to see if we can hear you.
Oh, we can.
You're good? Okay, so we're good? Okay, this is interesting. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and proceed and we'll go ahead. So today we are actually going to be ending a year of learning communities in the Bay Area. This is actually our 4th learning community convening. And today we are focusing on, once again, on our advocacy, overall looking at advocacy efforts as an organization. We're actually going to be working today an element that is very important and critical for our families, especially in the asset building components, and that is we're going to be having financial empowerment, which is one of the main components that will support families in our communities. We're just looking at one more time. Are we good? Sound wise? Okay. And we're just making sure our remote site we can have audio both ways. Bear with us. As we continue working on our IT, once again, we have one team member that you joined us in the past. This was a few months ago you mentioned. Oh, and Brenda too. Oh, perfect. So we have 2 of our attendees today that have attended our learning communities in the past. So I really would love to hear today as we proceed in today's presentation to maybe think about areas or challenges or opportunities that perhaps you've thought about since you've attended the last learning convening with us, and think about what you would like to see for us strategies provide to you in the future. And for my new first time attendees, think about what today you can take away with you and develop as a tool for your agency, but at the same time, how we as strategies can support you to build on advocacy efforts. And so let's go ahead and let me share with you what we are about. Strategies is actually part of a partnership. We are actually a statewide collaboration. And let me see. Looks like we're back. Almost back. Here. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So as I was mentioning, let me back up before I go into more about strategies. Today, we're actually going to be looking at integrating in our advocacy work. We're going to be looking at how we can focus on family economic empowerment. And so today we are actually featuring two speakers, and our speakers are Fran Bitterman and Bill Bankhead, who are actually going to talk about the Contra Costa Family Economic Security Partnership and Spark Point Contra Costa program. And they're going to share with you what the program, how the program evolved, and some of the current services that they actually offer through a partnership, which is really what we look for, is providing programs and models that can support you in the work you do. And the goal is to be able to build on our advocacy efforts. And as everybody introduced themselves, I just realized I did not introduce myself. So let me introduce myself. My name is Lucy Hernandez, and I'm a Strategies 2.0 consultant. I'm actually a trainer. I focus on training organizations on child abuse prevention programs, services, curriculum, and facilitating today our learning community. I've been in this field for 20 years as staff member, all the way up to being director of operations and programs for both rural and urban organizations, having multi-counties and having teams that were focused on child abuse prevention programs, foster youth, housing programs, and serving basically our low income and vulnerable populations. My passion really is to be able to bring these resources and tools to our agencies and professionals so that we can build strategies and initiatives that we can partner with one another. I always tell my team members that in our work, social capital is really critical, and that is building relationships, building your network so that we could actually learn from each other, but at the same time leverage and hopefully align our efforts for a collective impact. Today's participants, as I mentioned, we have Sonoma, La Luz. We have our host, we're being hosted by First 5 Alameda, and welcome to our online participants. Do we know who's online, who our participants are?
Currently, I have Raymond Cancino. He is this. I'm just hoping he's near the microphone.
Raymond?
Raymond. We have Raymond Cancino. He is from Community Bridges, the CEO in Santa Cruz County. This is his first time with our learning community.
Great. One participant? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so Strategies 2.0, we are actually an organization that is focused on being the catalyst to empower and ensure that our communities have the tools and resources to be able to have our children thrive and our communities also thrive in a healthy environment. Our organization is actually funded by our Office of Child Abuse Prevention, which is under the California Department of Social Services. And we actually work in collaboration with two other entities. We work with the Southern California partner, and which is the Children's Bureau. And we also work with San Diego State University, who actually provides our curriculum. In partnership, the three entities actually support today our training, consulting, and networking. And so what we're doing is we actually provide training for organizations, and then our goal is to be able to continue the ongoing development for you through our learning communities. And overall, our goal is to be able to come and provide support and opportunities for you to network, and which is my goal today. Strategies, our website, you can sign up for the newsletter, request or register for trainings, and also you can register to attend any of the learning communities, which we are statewide, and you definitely can attend one that is near your organization. I know that we have partners that have multi counties, and so this will be a good opportunity for team members and other counties to attend. So thank you to OCAP for their support. And so today we are looking at 3 things that we want to deliver, and that is that we want to make sure that as you come together that there's opportunities for you to discuss cross-sector partnerships. And important for us to also be able to provide a forum of discussion so that there's maybe perhaps a specific issue or an opportunity to work together to be able to build capacity and hopefully solve problems collectively. Our goal today is to help you build upon your advocacy efforts. And today, as I mentioned, we are going to be focusing on our financial economic empowerment. In social media, we definitely want to make sure that if you are utilizing some of our information today, or if you like to share it within your networks, we have a couple of hashtags for you. And one is hashtag Bay Area LC. And our second one is hashtag financial advocacy. So if you are like our team members on social media, feel free to share and to be able to also share about our work with strategy so that we could actually invite others to join us and be able to work in partnership with them. Okay, so, and this is where I'm looking at my camera and I'm looking at our PowerPoint. But today's agenda is going to be, we've obviously talked about, we welcome and introduce everyone already, but we're going to talk about building blocks and advocacy. So I want to do just a recap of what we have done in the last 3 sessions, this being our 4th session in this year. We're going to have our guest speakers provide their presentation to us today, and we're going to be also giving time for you to do Q&A, and this will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Fran and Bill will be able to share more about their program and give you an opportunity also to get their contact information so that you can actually hopefully connect with them after our session today. We're going to do also some future planning. We want to hear from you on what's important for you when it comes to building capacity within your organization. We deal with a lot of our issues. We're dealing with a lot of environmental factors, but what is it that we as strategists can bring to you to be able to help your efforts in advocacy, to be able to strengthen our families and to be able to continue supporting our communities? And we will close our session today at 12:30 with reflections and evaluations. All right, any questions? Any questions? We're good? Okay, so this is what our objectives are for today. 1, learn how to develop a roadmap to explore and create a customized plan to increase advocacy work within your direct service agency. Our goal is to be able to provide you the elements to be able to take this back and hopefully work within your teams to be able to look at some of the strengthening of your programs. Second, we would like to make sure that we can help you learn more about how to address the systemic changes needed to reduce poverty, increase income, and build assets for low-income families through advocacy. And third, our goal is that we can help you connect with Bay Area colleagues to find shared interest and explore possibilities for shared actions and deeper learning. And that includes obviously our North Bay as well. So let's do a review of 2017, 2018. So Learning Communities actually launched here in the Bay Area in September 2017, and we started with our first learning community really because as we were working with our organizations, we were listening to some of the needs that agencies are being impacted, and as we were receiving this input, we actually developed our learning community around topics that organizations were asking primarily. How do we advocate for our families in relation to the first topic, which was immigration, climate, and how it impacts the delivery of services? This learning community focused on understanding what is happening currently and what is going to happen in the future when it comes to immigration. Obviously, we're dealing with a lot of current issues at this time. So this was actually a timely learning community convening because it started preparing us for a shift in the narrative on immigration. And so sometimes organizations want to empower our clients and our parents, but it's not about just empowering our clients, but it's about we as an organization looking deeper into what we could actually do as an organization. What do I do with my local officials? What do I do with my state, my regional partners? What can we do collectively so that we actually have a voice, that unified voice, and actually move matters forward? We had the opportunity to also share with you how do these services impact our communities, but also where we actually have models. And we had actually Somos Mayfair Center actually come and speak along with the Rapid Response Network. And they actually shared some concepts of how to respond to some of the current issues that they were facing with their clients. And so that's an example of a connection that your organization can make by calling and contacting, being able to learn more, especially if it's your first time here. But it is always an opportunity for us to, as strategies, to respond and be able to support you as giving you tools to be able to build internal capacity and knowledge. And so I'm going to pass it to Michael, who's joining us from Sonoma, who's actually going to share with us some of the takeaways from that session. Michael?
Hi, thanks, Lucy. Yeah, you covered the topic area pretty well. We had folks from Somos Mayfair, from Sacred Heart Family Resources, and Gia Associates and Amigos. And they went through all the legal issues, what people do have the capacity to do, where folks are vulnerable. And then they also, Sacred Heart Family Services described their rapid response system when there's word of an ICE raid and getting word out to the community, and also getting legal help and support out to the folks affected. And as you said, Somos Mayfair talked about really the hard work of building trust with the community when we're working with, our community is not just vulnerable, it's targeted. And how do you build trust and help people get what they can for themselves? It was, I'll mention there was actually earlier in September, we had a community cafe in Marin where we had folks from around the Bay Area say what they're interested in. That's where we got a lot of this information and these topic priorities. And folks were interested in advocacy. It was spring of 2017, so immigration obviously was a big worry, and rightly so. And looking at root causes of some of these issues. And so my takeaway was, by being trustworthy and being in conversation with the community and responding to what people needed right then, the organizations were really able to rise to the occasion. So I'll leave that as a takeaway for this one.
Great, thank you. And so that was an example that actually started strategies responding to a need that our agencies were dealing with, and actually started the discussion towards what is the next step. And our next step was based on what the needs are of our organizations. We found that creating change through policy and advocacy was a natural fit for what do we do now that we're looking at immigration at a local level. How do we better understand the process of how do you move now to the next step, which is the second building block. And this second session happened in November of 2017. And this one specifically allowed us as organizations to learn about the legislative process. And it is complex, and sometimes as organizations, we have limitations due to funders. We are not able to lobby. We're not sure how we really can interact or engage in this process. But this second learning communities convening allowed us to understand how we could actually have a natural fit, how we could actually be part of some changes, and how we could actually have a voice half of our clients and our residents. And this second building block really allowed us to start having the discussion of some of the current initiatives, bills, and current work that is being done to be able to be aware and understand where does our organization fit and what can we provide. One of the elements that's very important for us to know is our agencies provide the boots on the ground support to our clients, and you have the data. You have the qualitative and the quantitative data that some of our policymakers need. And as simple as an example, that's an example of how we can interconnect. Being able to provide those tools allows our elected officials to be able to move things forward on behalf of our communities. And so this was actually the second building block that we focus on, is how to prepare your organization with some strategies to be able to connect and be able to start having the discussions, and also better understand the role of our elected officials so that we could actually start building relationships with them, and also connecting with other organizations that may have additional information on how to leverage our partnerships. And our Michael will share with us also what some of the takeaways from that session.
Great. The presenters were Jamie Malhai from the California Family Resource Association and Mary Ignatius from Parent Voices. California Family Resource Association is a membership organization for family serving organizations, not just family resource centers. And they provide a lot of resources, a monthly around policy, a monthly policy call, and training around policy and advocacy. The biggest thing that I think that came out in the discussion is, and I've seen this in other policy conversations, is people feel they can't advocate, they can't get involved in the legislative process. And without repeating everything Jamie said, yes, we can, to use a phrase, and especially around educating legislators and building relationships with legislators and helping them understand that we who are serving families in the community, there's no other source of information for what's happening with our families, with our community, than us who are working in the community. So our legislators need that. And then Mary Ignatius was with Parent Voices. Parent Voices is a parent advocacy, statewide advocacy organization with county chapters focused on childcare access. And they have a long history of being not just parent engaged, but parent led. And I think the big takeaway from that is, you often hear from legislators, well, I want to hear from people directly impacted by this issue. And it could be, the shortcut is to bring in someone to kind of tell their story and be a dog and pony show. And that might look good on the surface in the moment, but what Parent Voices has done, and I think it's a good model for those of us working with families and communities, is really work with the empowerment of the parents involved, work with making the connection between their personal concerns and policy. For those folks who want to get more involved with advocacy, that being part of their growth. So when they come to the legislature and tell their story, it's because they want to tell their story. They have a picture of what can be accomplished through legislation, and it's worth their while, and it's their voice, and that's the name of the organization. And that takes time, and relationship building, and celebration of successes, social connection, just time together, again, being trustworthy for each other. And so that's another recurring theme, I think, well, a couple, relationship building and to build trust. The work of the professionals is to be trustworthy.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And so therefore, we finalized our second learning community convening, and it led us towards the next natural step, and that was, now that we understand about way policy can actually incorporate change in our communities, we needed to address one of the biggest factors, and that is understanding what the California budget looks like. What are we having to prepare for? And what are some of the trends or some of the unexpected perhaps changes that we're going to see, and how do we better prepare? But overall, what is our role? So we had Scott Graves actually come and present to us the information about California's current budget climate, what to know and how to respond. And this actually was a very key conversation for us because it allowed us to see some of the current program or current funded, but one of the things that we also had an opportunity to do is to be able to understand some of the variables that could occur, and if so, how is our organization better prepared to respond if there were some significant changes in the areas in our programming. He actually allowed us to go through the process of how the budget is, and also allowed us to start understanding what processes needed to occur in order for budgets to be finalized, and to be able to know also what is our role before budgets are passed. What can we as organizations do to be able to once again advocate on behalf of our agencies? And so as our third building block, we actually were able to understand also some of the agencies or organizations that actually are involved in some of this process, and it allowed us to start building some of our networks and connections to be able to be connected and also stay tuned to what our agencies do to be able to partner with entities that we typically we're not familiar with. And so the California's current budget climate allowed us to now start looking deeper at now utilizing, we looked at immigration as one of our local issues, and also regional and state. We looked at changing the process through policy and advocacy, and then now understanding what are we looking at as a factor that is overall the budget to be able to support our efforts. Michael, what were some of the takeaways that you had from this session?
Yeah, thanks again. Scott Graves from California Budget Project walked us through the budget calendar and being sensitive to that, but it, using the building blocks, it built on the previous session in that, again, it boils down to relationships. If you have a relationship with your legislator, with the finance office, they can be educated through conversations. Jamie Malhide came back because we were farther into the budget year, and it was a relatively net gain for families in the state budget. A couple of things: there was increased funding for subsidized childcare, again, the power of parent voices, and there was a home visiting program was added to CalWorks. And Jamie related a story of how actually, luckily, she's situated in Sacramento, and they were able to get folks from the Department of Finance to come out and visit some family resource centers in some places where home visiting is happening. And that really opened their eyes and helped them create the model for the CalWorks home visiting. The other, and again, it continues that theme of the relationship building. Not on the agenda, but those of us who were there, I think there was an extra bonus of folks who were new to the learning community, some are over there, and hello, really connecting to other family serving organizations and family resource centers. And so that's what we want to build on. One of the folks actually is going to be our incoming Bay Area Learning Community Facilitator, Deborah Song, who does policy work with Lincoln Family Center in Oakland. And while I'm thinking of that, I also want to let folks know this whole year of work came out of the Child Abuse Prevention Council of Contra Costa County. Our partner Carol Carrillo, their director, contracted with Becky Nelson, and we're building on their work. We're going to continue working with Contra Costa CAPC. Carol is going to contract with Deborah Song in the fall. We already have something scheduled for October that we'll talk about later. But that was just to me, it was a real example. Their dedication grew out of relationship. That the work we put into being trustworthy for each other and a resource for each other and for our presenters and our participants is what we've been building on. So those are the two big takeaways from the year, and knowing what that is trustworthiness and relationships. I think the other thing that still stays with me, going back to the cafe last spring, and I know it's part of what our presenters today are about, that we know there's a lot of interest in advocacy and also getting at some of the root causes of issues that our families face and to connect with each other. And so aside from the takeaway, I'll invite folks to think through, and I know Lucy, you're going to do some exercises about how building these relationships can be beneficial to you over the next year. And so this last year was a great example of where it can go, and I think it can go even farther in the next year.
Great, thank you. We have a question.
Yeah, Lucy, we actually have a comment from Raymond, one of our online participants that Sierra's going to read to the group.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have an online comment.
Raymond reports that the biggest issue we face for their organization is the opposition to the same limited funds. When local jurisdictions are using 50% of their funds to pay for pensions, it leaves less for operating funds and puts them against fire and police. Their organization sees this as an issue, as an ongoing basis, and have seen as extra projects or nice to have services. He reports that creating new revenue streams is something that they're looking to explore: ballot measures, special districts, and special use of funds, etc.
Great, Raymond. And yes, and that this is an area where we know that our communities are looking at providing our safety net services, and also looking at how we provide our human services or social service programs. But it is something that only coming together and being able to put the value and listening to our community's needs really will allow us to have that discussion. So it is something that we are seeing, especially when examples like when realignment came into our communities, we had to work differently. And that was a conversation that allowed us to actually start exploring some opportunities, but also organizations started focusing on non-traditional funding streams. And so this is a good opportunity for us to take a step back and actually explore, map out what are the current funding streams that are coming in, but really what are the outcomes that we're trying to meet. And so Raymond has a good point. Learning more about the California's current budget allowed us to better prepare and have these discussions with our partners. So thank you, Raymond. And also, we'll be sharing today with our speakers, we'll be sharing also another way of supporting also our families in increasing their financial streams, which overall is connected to our local economy.
So
Okay.
Lucy, I'd like to speak to that real quickly, if I may. And thank you a lot, Raymond. I think you talked about outcomes, and I think that's going to be one of the real tasks for us is when the money follows crises like emergency services, we need it. Our neighbors in Lake County really need it right now. It's hard to make the case for prevention and communities, and that is, I think, part of that task, along with the advocacy, is describing the positive impact that our work can have, either economically, but also in prevention of other social problems down the road. And when you underfund prevention, it's harder to see the results. So that's the task ahead.
Definitely, and our work continues. Okay, so now that you've heard a recap of what we've done in the last year, we actually want to invite you to answer this question. And we have set for our hub, our team here in Alameda, we have a couple of half sheets there that you can use if you would like. But really, this is a time for us to, this is a question we would like to pose to you. And that is, what advocacy efforts is your agency currently working on? And what we would like for you to do is look at what is your organization doing, or how is your organization participating? And we would like for you to go ahead and maybe share that with the person next to you. So if we could actually have you turn, it looks like we have even numbers here. If you could turn to the person next to you and share what are some of the advocacy efforts that your agency is currently working on. And then for our online participants as well, if you could actually have your partner just share with them as well. We would like for you to share and think about community advocacy efforts or perhaps policy, but what overall is your agency currently working on? So we'll give you 3 minutes to talk about that, and then we will have you share with us. Thank you. Okay. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and come back, and I would like to hear from you. Why don't we do this? Why don't we have you go ahead and, as a team, you both can share among, for the rest of us, what are some of the current advocacy efforts that you are currently doing in your organization, but at the same time, if there's anything that it was an aha moment for you that maybe your partner shared, also highlight that for us. So this is the great opportunity for us to learn. And so let's go ahead. Can we start with you? Is it Veronica?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And we'll start here with the main hub, and then we'll go to our online participants.
We're preparing for the changes to public charge. There's been a leaked document that shows that what is considered public charge to become a lawful permanent resident in the United States may change and include a whole host of benefits, including Head Start, healthcare, a lot of other things as well. So we're part of a coalition in Oakland that's looking at getting the word out and also collecting comments on a web-based platform.
Okay, and so you mentioned this project is called?
It's the Department of Homeland Security changes to what's considered public charge to become a lawful permanent resident. So public charge.
Great, thank you. All right.
So we are very heavily involved in advocating for a state bond initiative that's going to be put on the ballot in 2018 for affordable housing. So there's a big affordable housing ballot this year, and we are encouraging everybody, especially our residents, to vote yes to provide more funding for affordable housing. We're an affordable housing developer, so this obviously is a really important issue for us, but I think housing is really, a critical component for low-income families.
Perfect.
And that's a bit, and we're trying to mobilize our residents to do that. And as part of that, voter education and voter registration and all that kind of stuff too.
Perfect, great, thank you. It's okay, and we just passed the microphone.
I'm Lauren. I just started a couple weeks ago, so I'm not completely sure about the advocacy work, but I know that our COO, Jeannie, is involved in the continuum of care reform and transitional age youth services, and she's on in some advocacy work groups. And yeah, and Teresa's organization, according to their brochure, testifies at public hearings on issues related to sexual assault of children and adults, and representing victims' concerns to public officials. So I thought that was really interesting.
Perfect. Public hearings for victims of crime, or is it just sexual assault? Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Against children and adults.
So our group, Brenda and I, both had more of a statewide perspective. So at the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, really our focuses are around education, providing education since we're a state agency. So basically we're really, our chief is really focused on elevating prevention within the child welfare system. So making sure child welfare directors put that as a focus, and then hopefully, the money follows. And so that's one big thing. We have our public and awareness campaigns around family engagement and Child Abuse Prevention Month. So trying to make those efforts larger so that they get more statewide visibility. So that's kind of a little bit piece of what we are working on statewide.
Excellent, especially because if we focus on prevention, then we're looking at obviously a return on investment, because we'll see a decrease in having to intervene or suppress our issues. So thank you for doing that. Brenda?
Yeah, I also had a statewide perspective for the Coalition for Victims of Child Abuse, and our advocacy efforts is more of the community, or getting all the members within the coalition to get to know each other, talk, learn about what each one is doing, and leveraging resources, also being able to help each other out where one organization might be stronger, one organization might be lacking. And then a lot of them do advocacy, not through our coalition necessarily, but through other funding streams, and they can share how they're using other funding streams to do advocacy and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you. And this is statewide, you said, right? Correct. Perfect. Great. Thank you.
My organization recently formed an advocacy committee with our board that I sit on as a staff member, and we endorsed, we're in San Francisco, Contra Costa, and Alameda, so we endorsed the childcare measures across all of those counties, and we're very active in the community work and getting out the vote, and we're now starting to look at what other issues we want to publicly support and work on that are not as directly related to the work that we do. So like immigration and what's going on at the borders right now. And also approaching policy makers and developing relationships.
Perfect. So, and you said local, is that what, okay, great.
So with Safe and Sound, we actually do quite a bit of advocacy work. And in fact, Katie Albright, our executive director, looks like she's coming October 10th to talk about using economic data for advocacy. So I won't talk about Safe and Sound. I'll talk about the Family Support Network. And what I was talking with Crystal about is that I'm new to this role, and we're really thinking about what that policy piece looks like. We used to have a policy committee where we would make recommendations at the end of each fiscal year for what we wanted to see different in San Francisco for children and families. But that's been, that hasn't been in action for a little while. So we're thinking about what to bring back. But in terms of community, I think we play a really big role in bringing family service providers together and really raising those voices up and telling our story in a different way and sharing that story with others. So, kind of still thinking that through a little bit.
But it looks like you're looking at that community engagement, trying to have that discussion. So, okay. And that is, obviously a key driver to moving or mobilizing change. So perfect. And welcome also, because you said new in your position, a couple months? New position. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to, do we have in the back any other? Okay, perfect. All right, so our online, let's go to Sonoma.
Okay. Hi, Lucy. So as you guys know, La Luz Center is a family resource center, so our approach is very grassroots. A couple of the things that we've been working on post-fire recovery is actually looking at how our small businesses and our community members can have a piece of the pie in terms of recovery. So we've gotten some funding to do small business loans. We're now embarking on our second cohort of construction trades program. And this is so that during the rebuilding, we can actually look at rebuilding a different type of community. With that in mind, we're also looking at our civic engagement component and looking forward to participating in the census count. There's still a lot to plan out around that. One thing that came up as well was housing. Although housing is such a huge topic, what we can do right now on our end is provide information and housing rights to our community. And last but not least, we also have our partnership with schools. We have a family resource center on one of the elementary campuses, as well as now Avance, which is a 0 to 3 school readiness program. And we're looking at a 2-generational approach to helping our families change the outcomes of their lives.
And I'll share, since I'm the one non-La Luz person here, I'm the one who got the aha, so earlier I had said, well, we're chasing the emergency and the crisis funding and have to make the case for prevention, but it's pretty amazing how they're using the situation to help families immediately, but also to lay the groundwork for that proactive work, the economic empowerment for folks in the civic engagement that in the crisis is the opportunity.
Great, thank you. Okay, anyone else from Sonoma? Is that a report?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, online. Do we have anyone from online?
Hi there, Ray. Can you hear us? Can you please?
Oh, okay. Well, good afternoon, or good morning, I should say.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
So,
we can hear you.
there's a couple, oh, good. Okay, I didn't think I was going to be unmuted. So, we've been working on 2 items. One has been kind of a wage equity discussion. What we found, the aha moment is that, having conversations with policymakers wasn't enough to have them invest. Making the prevention pitch wasn't enough in our community. And so what we've been doing is doing education and building a broad-based coalition to try to bring up some of these issues and talk about prevention and trying to get basically community pressure to change the investment strategy. And part of that has been through a nonprofit wage equity discussion. So not only working first with the leadership and those that are supposed to be our allies, board members, CEOs, about these issues, and then moving hopefully that discussion to larger communities. So that's been the planning, the aha moment, and what we're working on collectively at this point in time. Hoping to be able to shift some of the dollars. And then as an organization, we've also been really a part of a larger statewide initiative for AB 1163, which is essentially just a very direct outcome of some information we were hearing from the community during immigration issues that we've all experienced and faced. We have families of mixed citizenship and immigration status, and they were not having a tool available to them to allow caregiver opportunities. There was either a form, which is a caregiver form, which didn't give enough rights for individuals. So doctors didn't have to use it or need it. They couldn't apply for a passport to try to do reunification. They couldn't do a lot of the major, responsibilities. And then the other opportunity that they had is actually giving up their guardianship, which is really scary because in California it's really hard to get your guardianship back. So this AB 1163 is to basically use the power of attorney form to basically allow families to give responsibility to someone that they choose for a limited time as they go through the immigration process, and as a way to kind of help develop a responsive child care safety plan that doesn't have to pin people between giving up their full parental rights or having the child go into the foster system. So it's kind of a little project that we're working on at the statewide level, and those are the 2 things that we're working on.
Great, thank you. And a critical component that we started having the conversation back in September of 2017 here at our convening, but especially seeing some of what you're doing, Ray, and along with our partners in the room, our agencies are aligning to respond to the community needs. And so this is a great list. Thank you. Do we have anybody else from online? Nope. Great. Okay. So thank you, Ray. Thank you, Sonoma partners. And thank you for sharing what your agency is working on, because one of the things I would like for you to think about as we move into our presentation is in your packets, you'll see that there is a second handout in the back of your PowerPoint. And what you'll see is that we are wanting for you to think about not just what our partners are sharing and what their efforts, but I heard housing. Sonoma just shared about the importance of housing. I know we have Eden House is also focusing on some of the housing work, and also Veronica's team. So here's opportunities for us to start identifying what are some of our partners doing and being able to grow our network to be able to hopefully align our efforts. So these are things you're currently working on, but in that second form that you'll see, we actually would like for you to start thinking about, I know our work is not done. And I know that our work continues, especially during the times of, our communities are feeling vulnerable. This is the time for us to think as an organization, what can we do? How can we leverage our power, our resources, our capacity to be able to start addressing some of the systemic issues? And as we start building on this list, the handout allows you to start also thinking important to you? What's important to your organization? And throughout the think about what are some of the areas that we as strategies can support your growth, your ongoing development, and also think about that may not be able to benefit from some of this information, or perhaps are currently working on some advocacy efforts that we can join, and hopefully we can start having them join us in our convening working. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to continue doing this towards the end of our presentation, but I am going to have our speakers actually come on, and I'm going to go ahead and before I move on, is there any questions on what we just covered, or any other areas that we did not write? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and transition here into our speakers. Let me just share about their family economic partnership, and also how they actually started a movement. And it was just like you thinking about an issue and how do we address it, they actually went ahead and took that step and actually mobilized services to make it happen. And so I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Fran Bitterman, First 5 Contra Costa coordinator. She is with the Family Economic Security Partnership, and Bill Bankhead, who is our Spark Point coordinator at Contra Costa College. So I will go ahead and have them welcome them, and thank you, Fran and Bill, for taking the time today to provide us your information and your excellent program. All right, thank you. And we're going to do a quick transition here on microphone, so bear.
This one. Yes. Yeah, sure. Anywhere. No, just put it on the here. Does that work? No. You can just put it down if you want it. That's fine. Yeah, no problem. That's good. Okay, I think we're wired. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah? A little louder. Okay, better? Better? Is it? Yeah, for people to hear them. Right. Okay. Hi, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting us to come talk to you today. It's been really interesting hearing what you've all been doing already. It very much follows a trajectory of what we at FESP have done, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of who we are, how we got to where we are right now, and then Bill's going to talk to you a little bit more about the specifics of the deeper dive project that we engaged in. So first of all, what is the Family Economic Security Partnership? And I should say, I work for First 5 Contra Costa, but I staff this coalition that's really not a First 5 project per se, but it's a coalition of different providers who provide a wide range of services to help families become more financially stable. So there are organizations that are members who provide job training and placement, organizations that help people with financial education, getting out of debt, managing money, things like that. And it's an open coalition to anyone who really is interested in economic security for individuals and families. We hold quarterly meetings. We invite speakers to come talk to us about topics, children's savings accounts, how to do successful financial education. We had Scott Graves talk to us about the budget project also. We've done trainings, we do workshops on request by our members. We started out with 6 agencies who got together because we really wanted to promote the Earned Income Tax Credit program, which is one of the most effective anti-poverty strategies in the country. So we started talking to people about it, letting people know about it, and our 6 community agencies grew to about 45. So we now have about 45 member agencies who are part of our FESP community. And as the partnership grew, we realized EITC is really important, but we need to do more. Let's think about what that might look like. So I'm going to bring all these in. We started out to learn about what are some of the root causes of poverty. We want to go beyond direct service. We embrace the notion that poverty is not inevitable. These are not quite following, okay. But as a function of policy, and that means we can make changes. We acknowledge direct services are really important, but they're not enough to eliminate poverty. And we needed to move more upstream and to address the systemic issues that contribute to poverty. And we also realized that we needed to build a group of champions. We needed to engage our direct service agencies in more advocacy, as you've all talked about today. The only way we're going to change policies is so we have everybody contributing to that conversation. So what do we talk about system change, structural change, what do we mean? And this is just to sort of give you an example. It's the difference of working with one individual, which is critically important, but at the same time advocating for policies that will benefit many people. So we started to educate ourselves about what that would look like. So we brought in people to talk to us about the housing issue and the childcare issue and living wages, and affordable housing is one of the big issues in our county. So these are just examples of how we all do something individually, but there are greater things we can do that changes the system. We also started to just participate in local and state regional coalitions that are addressing anti-poverty issues. We joined a CalFresh working group. We've just formed in our county. We're participating in a budget justice coalition to look at how to increase transparency in the Contra Costa budget. And we also realized, and you've all heard this too, we didn't have to be experts on everything. We had to figure out who do we partner with who might have that expertise that we then can learn from. So one of the things everybody always says is, I don't know what we can do about advocacy. I'm not sure we can do advocacy. Can we do advocacy? Well, this is a great slide that talks about what you can do. Everything in green you can do. You actually can do some limited in the red. We've got this as a handout for you all. There's a really huge range of what you can do around advocacy. And it doesn't just mean making phone calls or meeting with legislators. There's a whole lot of other things you can do depending on your interest and your capacity. So for FESP, the Family Economic Security Partnership, we said, well, okay, what do we need to do to influence policy at the local, at the state, at the regional, at the federal level? So the first thing we did is we actually developed a protocol for how to respond to calls to action. So what steps should we take from our members to be able to write a letter in support or opposition of a piece of legislation? And we passed that protocol with our member approval. We then developed a policy platform, which actually outlined kind of our policy values and priority issue areas. And currently housing is one of our #1. A couple years ago, it was minimum wage. We created a legislator list that listed every legislator in the county, their Twitter handles, their Facebook pages. So make it really easy for folks. If you want to contact your legislator, here, you can just look it up. You can see where you live. You can see where your organization is. And you know exactly who you should talk to. We also started really talking about levels of engagement. We know everybody's busy. We know everybody can't all of a sudden change everything you're doing to become advocates and solely, but there are a whole lot of things you can do. And there's a range of things you can do. You're going to hear a little bit more about this later, but just sort of to illustrate it, you've all talked about the importance of voting. So sharing information is a level of engagement. You can put up a sign that says voting day is this day, and here's your closest voting booth. or you can actually mobilize your constituents and drive them to the polls. So there's and everything in between. So levels of engagement and advocacy steps really range depending on what your interest is and what your agency's capacity is. So our executive committee said, we'd like to really take a look at what it would take for a direct service agency to engage more in advocacy and really to assess their interest and capacity to do so. And what would that look like? And that was sort of the beginning of what we called our Deeper Dive project. So what we looked for was an agency that said, I'm willing to work with us to learn more about the root causes of poverty, to do an assessment of their agency's capacity to integrate policy into their direct service work, to develop an action plan based on the survey and the assessment that they did, and then to actually implement the plan. So SparkPoint Contra Costa, which you will hear more about from Bill, will tell you a little bit about who they are and why they volunteered. We realized we don't have the expertise to really help agencies learn how to integrate advocacy into their direct service. So we wanted to figure out who can we work with who could help us do that. We raised some money from some really great funders in our county who are very supportive. And we hired the Building Movement Project to work with us. And we are incredibly grateful to having Judy Sherman, who was the consultant who worked with us for 6 months and really led us all through this process. Thank you, Judy. She's everywhere. So a pilot team was assembled by the SparkPoint director, and they were incredible. There they are. And I'm now going to turn it over to Bill, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about what the exact Deeper Dive project was, what that 6-month process was, what they learned, and what their outcomes were.
One moment here, please. All right, can everybody hear me in the room? Great. Can everybody hear me online and remotely? Do we get a thumbs up there? Okay, great. Thank you. So once again, thank you very much for inviting Fran and I to come join you today. We really appreciate coming. And let me start by saying I'm really impressed about hearing all the stuff that you guys are already doing. That's really exciting. So congratulations to you on that. So SparkPoint is a large initiative put together originally by the United Way of the Bay Area with the goal of part of their effort to end poverty in the Bay Area. So there are about 25, 26 SparkPoint centers throughout the Bay Area, all of which are partnerships of individual direct service agencies, which each specialize in some area of financial development. So I'm sure all of you are reasonably close to a SparkPoint center. So one of the things that we realized as part of the Family Economic Security Partnership and why we wanted to become part of this effort to really do this deeper dive and look at advocacy was that we saw, hey, coalitions are great. We're all part of a lot of coalitions, and coalitions can have a big impact because it's a lot of people working together, but they face the challenge that unless it's a funded coalition, they often have very limited resources, and it can be tough to make some of those bigger impacts, particularly as a group of direct service agencies. So we wanted to say, okay, well, what can we do as an individual direct service agency that helps feed the coalition's effort, but allows us to have some direct contributions on our own? So that was part of what we looked at as we started moving into it. So we said, okay, we want to figure out what can we do as a direct service agency to incorporate advocacy work into what we're doing within the bounds of our current capacity. So we went to work by first coming up with some goals that we wanted to have for the program. We decided one of the first things we needed to do was figure out, where are we today? What are we doing today? So we decided, okay, we're going to start with a survey. So we developed a survey and sent that out. We then moved into analyzing those results, sharing those results, coming up with an action plan, and then reporting that back. Because part of the goal of this project was not to do it just for ourselves, but to do it as a pilot for all the members of FESP. To say, hey, here's what we did. We encourage you as an individual agency to consider doing something similar, to think about how might your agency be able to do direct advocacy work. So we came up with a 14-question survey. We sent that out to all of our staff. We sent that out to our steering committees. We sent that out to a pretty broad range. And we only gave people a week to do it. Because of course, we all know if you give people a month to do something, they will all wait until the last 2 days to do it. So only gave people a week. We made a point of really emphasizing the survey and that we really wanted results at every staff meeting, every board meeting, every opportunity we had to push people. And we intentionally set the end date of the survey to be like 1 day after we knew a lot of those meetings were happening. We could go into the meeting and say, okay, as soon as you leave, go do this. Or we're going to take 5 minutes in the meeting, everybody pull out your phone and do the survey, something like that. So we did this great survey, and then we started looking at the results. So we had almost a 70% response rate on the survey. So we were really happy to see that. We asked a lot of questions about what are people's perceptions of SparkPoint and what we do, as well as what do they think we should do, what would be impactful as we started looking at advocacy. And we want to share with you some of the results of what we got out of that. So some of the major highlights was, one thing, we realized we don't actually have a mission statement, which was kind of a revelation for a lot of us. Each of the partner agencies within SparkPoint had their own mission statement back home, and SparkPoint regionally had a very long half-page mission statement overall, but SparkPoint Contra Costa did not have a defined mission. And as a result, there was a lot of confusion. A lot of our respondents thought we had a mission statement, and partly because of the regional one. And not having the mission statement was part of why people didn't think we did any advocacy, because we didn't have a mission statement that said that we did it. Internally, we talked about our direct service work, but not advocacy work. And so particularly among line staff, there was a lack of awareness of advocacy. Senior staff, managers, and board members were more likely to perceive that we did that kind of stuff. Interestingly, what we found was that there was no lack of interest in doing advocacy. There was no resistance among virtually any of the respondents to incorporating advocacy. And it didn't really come across that there was a significant barrier around time or money in terms of trying to do advocacy in general. The biggest thing was skills. Staff did not feel like they knew what they should do or how to do it around advocacy. So those were things we said, okay, well, we gotta work on that. Other things that came out of the results were that there were kind of 3 general types of activities that we thought would fit within our scope. Right, kind of touching back to the earlier slide of all the different types of activities you can do and what can you not do. We said, we think that community engagement is a big one. All right, helping connect our clients to resources and opportunities around the issues we care about, even the ones that are not directly provided by us. All right. We also thought partnering was one of our key strengths, and we're already a partnership, and connecting to other agencies was something that we could absolutely work on. the work with the coalitions, for example, and FESP and strategies and all the other coalitions you're in. And then really working on clear, compelling messages so that internally we knew what we were doing and staff felt connected, but also our external messaging was clear. That we would communicate, educate, and engage our partners, clients, and the public on key issues. All right. Communicate, educate, and engage our partners, clients, and the public on key issues. So when it came to, okay, well, that sounds great, but that's kind of intellectual, high level, how do we actually do that? That's where we moved into motion graphics. We moved into, well, what do we actually think we can do? And most of our staff said, these are things we think. We can share information. We can put out flyers. We can put stuff up on our Facebook page and our other media channels to get the word out. We can help encourage voting. Get the vote out, get people registered. We know that we work with disadvantaged populations who are historically underrepresented in things like the census count and in a lot of elections. So how can we help them get their voices heard to influence policy? Encouraging them, share your opinion, make your voice heard, really emphasizing that your vote matters idea. Advocacy campaigns, specifically around identifying what are specific issues that our agency wants to take a public stand on. And this, of course, is usually going to be something that's at your board level or your steering committee level to decide to take a stand and then publicize that. And then lastly, leadership and skill building development, not only for our clients, but also for our staff, right? Making sure that people know how to do the things that we're encouraging them to do. So next we say, all right, we've got all these things that we want to do. We had a big, long list. We said, okay, we got to narrow this down. We got to focus, because otherwise we're going to wind up with the classic thing of we spent all day at a retreat coming up with all these great ideas, and then we didn't talk about or do anything with them until the next retreat. All right, so what are a couple of specific things we can actually get done? So first we said, okay, we want a mission statement. We want a mission statement for Spark Point Contra Costa that all of our staff can rally around and that we can use to really channel and define what kind of advocacy work are we going to do in relation to our direct service work, and measure everything we do against that mission statement. We wanted to really focus on training our staff. Once we had a sense of what we wanted to do, let's make sure that we identify what skills are we lacking in our staff, and let's provide those. Let's bring in those trainers. Take that next step then to eventually bringing in training for clients as well. And then as part of that, getting those clients engaged. How can we get our clients active in the kinds of work that we're doing? Get them doing some self-advocacy as well. So all of this took place, as we said, over the course of several months. We got together, roughly about monthly, I think, for most of the time, doing individual work back at our home agencies as well. And we were spread out across 4 different physical sites. So bringing people together for that was one of the challenges we had to overcome. But it was a really good experience. We had a lot of fun doing it. It was really successful as well. Now, as we got into doing the digging in and saying, all right, now how are we going to make these things happen? How do we come up with a mission statement? What kinds of training do we need? Some of the things that we did, and this is where Judy came in and was really helpful, was helping us recognize we didn't have to hold the whole world up by ourselves all at once, right? That making small changes, making those 5% shifts are cumulative, and in some cases multiplicative, right? They're going to magnify and become really important. So if we can make that small piece, what are the small things we can do that are relatively easy to incorporate into our existing structures? As we were doing the action planning, we realized, hey, we're really good as a direct service agency of working with an individual client, identifying their needs, coming up with a plan to help them meet those needs, providing them direct services to reach the goals that they and we have. We're good at that. Big picture, kind of strategic, organizational planning around that, not as strong a thing for us. We don't do it as often. And so Judy was able to bring in a social action framework, a tool, a worksheet that we were able to use to help us kind of go through key steps and make sure we were addressing the most important things, remembering. And then of course that parallels the work we do with individual clients, but thinking of it at a larger systems level. You know, who needs to be part of this conversation? What are the outcomes that we're looking for? What's the context in which we're doing this advocacy work or trying to come up with things? What are benchmarks that we're going to have? So back to work, working on all of that, digging into the details, coming up with specifics, starting to test them out. All right. The new mission, we said, okay, well, who should be involved in coming up with our mission statement? Well, obviously, our steering committee is going to be the ones who make the final approval, but we want staff to be involved in coming up with that. We want to make sure that we're bringing our clients in as well, since they're going to be the ones who are on the receiving end of that mission. Let's make sure it's meeting the needs that they have. All right. What are the context and what are the activities that we already do? And do they fit with our initial concept of a mission? You know, one of the things that we did to help us do that was we went out and we solicited a whole bunch of different mission statements. We pulled the mission statements for all of our home agencies. We pulled mission statements from partner agencies. We looked up online, what is the definition of a mission statement? How does that differ from a values statement? And a statement, and a vision statement, those kinds of things, so that we could be really clear and focused about what we were doing. And ultimately what we came up with was SparkPoint's mission is to partner with agencies to empower individuals and families to become financially sustainable and advocates for social change. And we made a point of getting that advocacy piece into the mission statement while still making sure that it focused on the direct financial work that we do. So there's our overall staff. So now we had this mission statement, we had a list of training goals for ourselves, we had a list of what are some of the activities we want to do. What did we actually do with it? Well, we got the new mission statement. We got a lot of input on that. We got our board, our steering committee to vote on it, and we actually implemented that. And then to help make sure that we stuck to it, it didn't just stay on paper. We made it a policy that all staff added that mission statement to their email signature block. All right. So now it's visible to all of our external partners and anyone we send email to, but it's also visible to the staff every time they're sending out an email. All right. We made a point of revamping our staff meetings so that we were talking not only about specific immediate client level issues that were going on, but to also raise up and make sure that all of the staff knew what kinds of policy things are we doing? What are the efforts happening at the steering committee level or that the director is off doing on behalf of the agency that line staff are not seeing on a day-to-day basis? Part of that was also to part of that was also to make sure that staff were able to recognize the things we were already doing that do feed into those larger advocacy efforts. So every time you mention to a client, hey, don't forget there's an election coming up, that's part of our advocacy work. I know that doesn't take a lot of time and energy in your meeting with the client, but it does count. Related to that, the client engagement piece, making sure that we looked at revising our orientation session and our intake forms to really solicit more input from the clients, to make sure that we were really being strengths-based on clients, looking at what are they already doing right, as opposed to what are the challenges they're facing or the problems they're having, as well as starting to ask them about what issues do you care about on a more broad level. Yes, we know you're here because you're looking for a job. Where do you stand on, or what matters to you on societal level financial issues? What community issues are most important to you? If you could wave a magic wand and change something in the community, what would it be? To help kind of feed our conversations about where do we go next as an agency. We're also working a lot more on our social media and really emphasizing our Facebook page, trying to get all of our clients following that. I will invite and encourage all of you to follow us as well. It's at SparkPoint Contra Costa on Facebook. So we share a lot of local events, both the things that we're doing as well as things that our partners are doing, and announcements of policy issues that are coming up that we think are useful for people to know. We worked on the staff training, and we've been putting in a lot of new training for that. Part of that is at our staff meetings. We use staff meeting time to provide training so that we're not cutting into service delivery time. So for example, over the summer, we actually skipped our staff meeting for a couple of months, our weekly staff meeting for a couple of months, in order to have all of our staff work with one of our partner agencies on a training about developing presentations and public speaking skills. So a lot of our staff meeting became just, okay, here's an email of all of the updates we were going to tell you in our staff meeting. Now instead, we're going to go to this training. All right. We also wanted to get some training on, let me back up, on voter registration and how to do that and what could we do. So we brought in a trainer around that. We just recently finished a speakers bureau where we were doing training not only for staff but for clients, where we partnered with a local Toastmasters group to help our clients learn how to craft their story and become comfortable telling it so that they could then share that story effectively with funders and with policymakers. So getting that message out as well and helping those clients advocate for themselves and each other. And then we also were working a lot on who are other people that we can work with and learn from, and how can we benefit from that. So like I said, we connected with Toastmasters. We connected with the city program that does training on public speaking. We looked at, we're primarily a direct service agency who wants to help in the advocacy area. Who are the agencies in our area who are primarily policy focused? And how can we work with them? As was mentioned earlier today, as direct service agency, we have the actual client stories. We have the on the ground data that those policy shops really benefit from. So let's find those groups, partner up with them so that we can reinforce each other. So we've had several of our clients now go and speak at events for policy partners. And of course, then we also sign on or contribute to collaborative groups and support letters. FESP, for example, is one of those coalitions that writes letters of support to policymakers around policies, and they solicit the partner agencies to sign on to that letter. So we make a point of identifying which of those do we want to sign on to. As ballot measures come up, the staff recommends some of those to our board, to our steering committee, for possible endorsement by the agency. We're also part of a local coalition working with the city on a community economic development plan, and specifically providing recommendations to the city for a community benefit agreement with new businesses coming into the city. So those are some of the ways that we're able to connect with agencies. So we had a lot of impacts for us directly and what we're doing. We also learned a lot just by going through the process. All right. We talked a little bit about sort of the individual versus policy advocacy work, individual versus systems level work, and really defining what do we mean when we use the word advocacy. That was a big revelation for our staff, was getting past assumptions on that. We worked around the client engagement, getting people involved, identifying barriers that they may face. Right, the partnering was huge, right? The relationships, we're talking about that here, and that has, sounds like, come up at every single one of these strategies meetings, is the issue of relationships. Working across the sites and throughout the organization was really helpful. We also, the small tweaks make a difference, and that mindset shift that I mentioned of making sure that we were really focusing on those clients' strengths and their interests and letting that drive the work. So with that, well, I'm going to bring Fran back up here, and we want to share with you kind of some of the things that, as a result of this work, we recommend or encourage your agencies to think about doing, and ways that you can do similar things, because of course, not everybody is going to be able to go through a 6-month process like this, bring in a great consultant to help with it. That's not realistic for everybody. But what are some of those 5% shifts or small elements that can be helpful?
So I just want to reiterate. Yeah. Oh, you want me to use?
Okay. I want to reiterate what Bill said in the beginning also. You all have done some amazing work already. And a lot of it sounds like a lot of what Strategies 2.0 and your trajectory really follows a lot of what we've done in Contra Costa. So I just want to acknowledge that to all of you, because I think it's really great. And that list is, I'm sitting there going, yeah, we've talked about public charge. We've talked about, I don't know, civic engagement. We've talked about housing advocacy. So you guys are already on the road. Like Bill said, we know everybody can't spend 6 months and raise money to do a deep dive. However, there are things you can do. There's a tool that Boulder Advocacy has. It's a short or a long form called Act Quick. It's a great way to assess what your interest and capacity is in a wide variety of areas around advocacy. And I've got a sample that I can show you later. It's a great way to sit down and just start to figure out, I don't think we want to do this, but we might want to do this. And there's a lot of things that we never even think about, research, analysis, messaging, that we don't always think about as advocacy, but in fact, they are building blocks for advocacy. You can bring trainers in to talk to you about what you can and can't do. And there's a forum called the 501H election that helps nonprofits track their advocacy activities and make sure that what you're doing is completely legit. And it's an easier way to actually track and monitor what you do. So there are a whole variety of tools and things you can do. Again, partnering, we've all talked about it. We don't have to be experts all in the same issue. We are deeply connected to a larger, broader issue in Contra Costa that's taking on housing. Housing is incredibly complex. It's really difficult. There's no way we're going to all be experts, but we can respond to calls to action. So again, it's just sort of making sure we connect with the agencies who have that expertise. When they say, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z, we can try to mobilize folks and our staffs to get out there and respond to their calls to action. Bill talked about mission statements. Most people don't think about including advocacy in their mission statement. When you hire staff, do they have advocacy experience or policy experience? We know they may be great in direct service, but how about advocacy? Have they ever done policy work? Do they know what that is? It's just another way of little by little integrating advocacy into what you already do. We've mentioned the 5% shifts. On the Building Movement Strategies website, there are case examples of these 5% shifts, and I really encourage people to take a look at them because they just give you ideas of small changes you can make that actually make really a big difference. Your intake form, everybody has intake forms. You can revise it to ask clients, we know you came in because you want us to help you with debt management or with job training or whatever, but what other community issues are you really struggling with? And then you'll find out, they're really concerned about housing or they're really concerned about childcare. Gives you the lens on where you might act as advocates in a different way. And all of these issues, as we all know, they're all interconnected. If a person is spending 50, 60% on housing, they're not going to have enough. They're going to worry about where food comes from or how they pay childcare, et cetera. So we're also really looking at how do we sort of break down silos and get folks who are in one field to kind of connect with the broader field because they're really all the same families. We're just sort of connecting with them in different places.
Oh, I guess I don't need that. So again, I think a big part or a great place to start is simply looking at all of that great work that you're already doing around advocacy and acknowledging that and making sure you're acknowledging that throughout your organization so that all of your staff recognize, hey, I'm not just helping the one client in front of me, I am contributing to larger system change, which is positive. And really take advantage of the partnering and networking opportunities like you have here today, whichever site you're at, to talk with other people, connect with them and the work that they're doing.
Last but not least, we have copies of our Deeper Dive project. We got a little extra funding to write it up. I brought copies for everybody today. And we also have a copy of that advocacy slide that I will get as soon as we're done and to share with you as well, so that you really have a sense of the breadth of advocacy activities you can engage in. So thank you very much. And we're here for questions and answers.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions and answers. And I believe we have a question online.
It's actually just a logistics question. If the items that you just mentioned, is that something we can also email to our online and remote site participants?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Everything is on the First Five website under funded programs, economic security. Under on the First Five website, which is www.first5coco.org. There's it says funded programs, and then underneath that it says economic security, and that's the FESP website, and everything I've mentioned today is up there. And we encourage and are thrilled if people beg, borrow, and steal it all. We also have a voter guide. This year we did a really big push on voter registration, getting people to vote. We put out a guide. Again, I'll show you copies. That's also on our website. Again, amend, take it, steal it. We're absolutely thrilled if you do that.
And we have Judy who's going to share some additional information.
Yes, I just want to add one thing to the work that these folks did. And I say this all the time, is that, I was able to bring a process to them, but it really, and you can bring a process to anybody, but it really takes that team to pick it up and to dive in really deeply to make it successful. So, and there were a number of key elements that made it successful that are outlined in the paper that Fran just mentioned. So I really encourage you to pick it up, and I have a PDF of it so I can get it to strategies and send it out. The other one thing I really want to emphasize is about client constituent engagement. There was at least one person, sometimes two people on that team throughout the whole process. So it wasn't just a simple effort of saying, so what do you people need? But actually engaging throughout the process of looking at the data, analyzing the data, giving feedback about what the data was saying to them, what resonated for them, and also participating in the presentations, development and presentation to the board and to the FESP partnership. So it's a switch. That's a 5% switch, is to engage your constituents, whatever you call them, your clients, constituents, participants in the process across the continuum of activities.
And Judy, thank you again for being such a great consultant and a partner on that project. So as we move on after today, I certainly encourage you to ask questions now. You're welcome to contact Fran and myself afterwards, but also take advantage of Judy as a resource as well.
Thank you. Do we have questions?
Please pick our brains while we're here.
Well, I do have a question, Bill, and you mentioned the community benefit agreement. And so can you share how did you collaborate with the city or the county to be able to put that community agreement together, and what were the specific outcomes out of that relationship?
Sure. So I'll back up one step. A community benefit agreement basically is when the city is looking at major employers coming into a city to open up shop. So often those employers are looking for tax breaks or other kinds of benefits and agreements with the city, and the cities often will have a community benefit agreement with the company saying, if we're going to open up shop here, we agree to hire locals preferentially, or we're going to help develop parks near our facility, or whatever they're going to do to help benefit the overall community. So one of the things that we did as SparkPoint is we joined a local coalition that was part of the Building Healthy Communities effort that's statewide. And that organization, locally called Healthy Richmond, is working with, has a relationship with the city, has been building that over the last few years with the city manager's office, and has an agreement that we will provide input on the larger citywide community economic development plan. And as part of that, a list of recommendations that the city put into any community benefit agreement that they ultimately develop to use with new employers who are coming in. So at this point, those conversations are still ongoing. We've developed some of the recommendations for the city and shared those with the city. The city is still developing the specifics of the development plan and the community benefit agreements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and as Fran and Bill mentioned, they are a resource for you. They are part of your network. And thank you so much. Do we have any questions from our online or from our Sonoma partners? No questions? Okay, and no further questions from the group? Okay, well, thank you, Fran. Thank you, Bill. I mean, we really appreciate you sharing this opportunity for us to actually go through this journey of how you come up with a solution, and then how you went through that process and helping us understand the small steps. What I really take away from this is what you said, is that small step really gives you that return in the long run. And so, and everyone, if we give them a hand. And we're going to go ahead and we are going to have a 5-minute stretch break so that people can actually get, we have some coffee, we have some waters. If you want to go ahead and stretch, we are going to go into our next section, which is actually looking at our building advocacy movement and future planning. So let's go ahead and do let's be back at 11:30. And we will resume then. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming back. And I know there's still some discussion. So we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. So this was actually a good segue to what we're doing next. So thoughts about the presentation? Takeaways from today's presentation? As I'm looking for my microphone. Any thoughts of things that maybe some strategies that you were able to take away from today's presentation? Pass that. Thanks. Brenda?
I really liked the idea of changing your intake form to see what other issues you might be facing. You know, if you come in for housing and then you don't talk about other issues, but if someone asks you, then you'll probably point it out. You're like, oh yeah, you can help me with that too. I think that's such a wonderful idea. I'm sure others have thought about it too, but I just never thought about it.
One tip I'll suggest on that.
Definitely.
So this is Bill with SparkPoint again. So the comment was, I really like the idea of adding a question to the intake form. One thing that we found with that is we didn't have anywhere in our client profile database to capture that information once we got it on the paper form. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking of adding something like that, make sure you have a place that you're capturing that so that you can then do something with that data.
Good point. Thank you.
And I think the question isn't always necessarily about what else do you need, but you know, what do you see is happening in your community? So that the question becomes a broader question and moves beyond the individual perspective to the context and the community perspective. This is what we mean about having a social change framework, is looking at the larger context and the ecology as well as the individual. So it's not moving beyond services, it's just integrating the two.
Good point.
Another advantage to it is it helps you identify who are those clients or constituents who come in who are actually interested in becoming much more active. That they're not just there to get your services, but they want to go to city council meetings or share their story with funders or policymakers or things like that. And you can help connect them to whoever is doing that kind of thing.
It's very important to, you know, obviously, like you said, Bill, is to build those champions in our community to be able to move forward with the message. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
And somebody asked, what is the specific question we have on our intake form? If I remember correctly, the specific question is, what community social issue are you most interested in? Or something very similar to that.
Great. Okay. Any other thoughts? Sonoma, do we have any aha moments or takeaways from today's presentation? I see Michael. I have you behind me in the screen and I'm looking at you, so. Okay.
When you see me, I'm unmuting.
We were also on top of the intake forms talking about how potentially First Five Sonoma, how they can get more involved in creating these types of institutionalized ways and partnerships for the community. I think that's something that we can learn from what they've done and bring it here locally.
It's a good point. And so Fran and Bill, maybe ideas Sonoma is sharing how First Five can get involved in Sonoma. And so First Five, obviously Contra Costa got involved. So what were probably some ways that you actually started that conversation with First Five? How did First Five come in initially? They actually identified the issue and then they brought you on board? Is that?
So the way things got started for us is SparkPoint was already a member of FESP, the Family Economic Security Partnership, which is a project of or spearheaded by First Five Contra Costa. I don't have the history of how FESP was formed and that kind of thing. Folks could follow up with Fran if they wanted to explore that. But FESP, as part of larger conversations among the whole membership, started looking at trying to get involved with advocacy and moving beyond just being a place that all these direct service agencies came together and sort of shared best practices, but started realizing that all the agencies were talking about, gosh, we really wish that minimum wage were higher. That would really help our clients. And FESP was going, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a way to do something on that advocacy level, but what would that look like? And that's part of where the idea of, well, let's investigate that and do this deeper dive on what could advocacy look like at the agency level.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay.
So I believe that Fran said that FESP began with 6 agencies who were looking at the effects of EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is one of the, I actually wrote down her words, one of the most successful anti-poverty programs in the United States, and how to maximize the income for people through EITC. And so it started with those 6 and then it grew, and it was under the umbrella of First 5 in Contra Costa, and it is a coalition on its own.
So thank you, Veronica, for bringing up some of the takeaways that Sonoma had from today's presentation. So let's take it to the next, now moving on. So we've heard today's presentation and we reviewed what we've done in the last 3 convenings. And so now it's a question to the group. And now that we have heard today's presentation and we address some of the current advocacy efforts that our groups are actually working on, I'm looking at this list and there's multiple efforts and opportunities for partnerships. And so the question I have for you is, with the current efforts that you're currently working on in your organization, how can we build on those efforts? What can we do to continue moving it forward? What can we do with the information we gather today, or some of the lessons or some of the strategies that were shared with us? How can we move this effort forward? And some of the things to think about is, if we can move our efforts forward, think about, how do we build more context? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What are perhaps some of the information that perhaps we need to gather to be able to build the information around our efforts? Think about, who can we talk to? Is there someone specifically after today's session that I want to connect with? Do I want to learn from? And how do we actually get some information, especially if we have some past presenters we could actually share with you if you would like to talk to them about some of the current efforts and advocacy that they've led. And think about, how do we build upon opportunities to learn, maybe perhaps learning about initiatives, learning about projects like we have today from Bill and Fran. But the key also is, how do we partner? And once again, we reiterate the importance of having that network and that relationship. So what I would like for all of us to do is, let's take a moment. We're going to take a few minutes, and I would like for you to write your thoughts about some of the advocacy efforts. Each of you actually shared something your organization is currently working on. And the goal today is, how do we build upon our efforts? What is it that we need to do? What is our next step? And that's usually, it entails thinking about, who do I want to connect with? What information do I need to gather? Who should I learn from? Or maybe I need to reach out to an entity that can lead me to the right direction. And so let's go ahead and let's work on an action plan that can allow us to take that next step as we leave today. So take a moment. We have some half sheets there at the table. And looking at these advocacy efforts, I can see a couple of these that actually were shared that actually are great opportunities for us to have a discussion, maybe with a person that is working on initiatives that is very similar to mine. So perhaps it could be as simple as looking at, who else is working in an effort similar to mine, and how do I connect and we can learn from each other and be able to potentially have a meeting or a discussion about our efforts and looking at potential ways of aligning our efforts. And so let's go ahead and take, let's take 10 minutes and we can actually write down what is it that we can do moving forward to build on our advocacy efforts, the ones that we shared this morning, or at least maybe those aha moments. Today you've learned about a new project. If that allows you to start building upon maybe an advocacy effort you're currently thinking about, this may actually allow you to move forward with this concept. That's a great opportunity. So let's go ahead and take a few minutes. Any questions about this? Okay, so if you would like to go ahead and turn to the person next to you, I know you had your partner this morning. It would be a great idea to also maybe collaborate and actually brainstorm about some ways that perhaps each other can support and the advocacy effort that you shared this morning, and at least can have that conversation with someone else to sort of brainstorm. So let's go ahead and take 8 to 10 minutes, and let's come up with some ways that we can build on our current advocacy efforts in our organization. Okay, any questions from Sonoma? Okay, all right, so let's go ahead. We're gonna go ahead and take 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll report. Okay, thank you. And so there's a couple of areas that I am really interested in connecting specifically with a few of you. So, but I want to hear from you is what is your next step? So how do we build upon what you shared or what you heard today from today's presentation? What are the next steps into building your advocacy efforts? So let's go around the table and have you share what your next step is, what is maybe a partner you would like to connect with, and I placed the list here so you can reference it if you want to talk. Who do you want to talk to next, or who potentially you want to learn from? So who would like to start? Do you want to start? I think we started with Veronica. Let's go ahead and maybe start on this side then. And then we'll go to our Sonoma and online participants.
Okay, so Crystal and I spoke about a lot of different things. One thing we started with was kind of that first step of understanding local issues and where your organization fits in. So maybe reaching out to local stakeholders, supervisors, and thinking about how to collaborate with a more diverse group of partners. So people who or agencies who might not have the exact same mission statement or values, but kind of reaching out a little bit larger, and how to share advocacy platforms with other individuals within your own agency. So we really like that idea of utilizing staff training time or staff meeting time as an opportunity for training and competency building, but then also being mindful of the capacity for advocacy work and being able to honor other viewpoints and what those expectations are if we are doing advocacy work within our agencies. And one last thing that did come up, and I heard you guys talking about it too, was kind of the political climate that we're in right now and that line between kind of personal and professional. And a lot of us are state funded, federally funded agencies, and how we can kind of make our voice heard and how I feel, and maybe this is too political for this room, but also how can we not, right? And with what is going on around us now. So, just that's all. Hope I didn't take the call.
I'm glad you brought it up because sometimes we just need support from one another. How do we, how do we move forward? How do we support our clients? How do we support our staff? Sometimes it's just having that peer support with one another to be able to then help your organization internally move forward with an issue, such as what we're doing with currently. So thank you for sharing. Okay, our next group.
So Miriam and I, we had the statewide perspective. So we talked about how we could use our network and statewide to collect the data information that we would like, and that could also guide us into the policies in the future. Just because when you do sit down with a legislator, they want the data of their district. They want to know the numbers of how much money is this going to cost, and how many people are going to get affected by this. We talked a little bit about how do we create a management system that they could all use so that we can collect the data that we really want other than just like Excel, because if you really want deeper data, then you need a larger management system. What else did I miss?
I think like just from my perspective, we did discuss kind of just building capacity around collecting data so that the advocacy is much easier if you have the right information. So I know that that's something that is on our radar with grantees that are funded through our office, just making sure that we're asking the right questions, that then they're asking the right questions, so that they can tell their story effectively.
I love the word building capacity because we're looking at assessing what kind of information do we need that will make maybe a macro impact, not just one program, but in your case you have multiple, I know you mentioned policies, you had mentioned statewide education on prevention efforts, so there's just a wide area or range of questions that you can ask to be able to pull the data. So great, I love that collaboration as well.
Well, Teresa and I both aren't are pretty new to this. So we talked about how we're not even really sure what policy and advocacy initiatives our organizations are working on. So to kind of engage staff members and in order to understand, well, what are our goals here and what are we already doing? And I think also learning about other organizations that have the same goals. Because again, I think awareness is key. I think that that's kind of lacking, just having that knowledge.
So as I mentioned, we're sort of advocating for a state bond around housing. And I think one of the things that this made me think about was we partner with a lot of nonprofit organizations who we pay to provide services in our housing. And so I think in addition to the efforts that I originally had in mind about working with our residents to help mobilize them, I think we could also help educate our nonprofit partners who also then go out and work in their own communities and helping to make sure they're aware of this issue so that they can just, spread the word as much as possible for what we think is a pretty critical issue. Yeah, in advocating for the state bond. Basically. Thank you.
Can you hear me, Sonoma? Are they having?
They don't hear you.
Veronica, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge I really love the idea of expanding the intake form, and I'm curious if you'd be willing to share what you developed.
So in this case, resources is what you're trying to connect with?
I'd just be curious to see what the
intake form. Okay, great. So learning from others. Okay. Sonoma or online participants, what are your next steps in your advocacy effort?
Hey there. So we were talking about the key role that La Luz has in terms of being a go-to place. So with that, I become some responsibility. And so we're looking at our strategic planning. The organization is going through a strategic plan. So embedding some of this information and advocacy role into that is something that we're all on board about. Also, there's an opportunity to leverage a new role within the organization. We're bringing in a program analyst position, and so making this, and initially it was to evaluate our programs, but I think that there's a role for them in terms of advocacy as well. There was a couple thoughts around collecting the data and then not only utilizing it to find a need, but also to helping it have it be represented with either elected officials or just people in the community that may need that information. And then possibly looking at First Five or Spark Points and seeing how we can collaborate or bring that to this county.
Perfect. So we have aligning with other partners.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anything else, Sonoma?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from online? Okay, great. Okay, so we've come up with a couple of ideas and strategies for us to move forward in our building advocacy efforts. And so these are just great opportunities for us to have a conversation with our internal team members, start planning. Sonoma shared that they're actually looking at including advocacy in their strategic planning. Those are kind of components, as Bill and Fran said, those small steps that actually will lead towards us actually making big changes and impacts. A few of you actually said the keyword is looking at who do we need to partner, who do we need to align our efforts with. And so this list allows us to start having these discussions and these next steps as we move forward. So thank you everyone for sharing. And we are going to type these up and send them out to the group so that you have them as a reminder. And as we start building our tool, obviously our toolbox, we always share that if we actually take one step or move forward towards implementing a change in our process, it actually allows us to actually make that initial step, which leads towards a movement. And so I appreciate having the conversation with each of you and sharing, and also who you sat next to, you have now learned a little bit more about what their efforts are. And so hopefully you do engage. Okay, so we are going to be passing out the evaluations, and so everyone should have their evaluations. And Michael, if you can share those with your team there in Sonoma. While you have the evaluations, we are going to move towards our last area of today, and that is our future planning. So today, as I mentioned, is our fourth convening in 2017-2018. We actually are ending our fiscal year, as this is June, and planning for the new year. And so now as we start July 1st, we want to hear from you on what are some of the topics that you would like to see in the future. And so we know that our work is not done. We know that we have, as we mentioned, we're dealing at this point in a time of uncertainty. We are dealing with every day the news shares with us, changes that sometimes we are trying to understand, and our organizations are being sought after by clients and our residents for answers and solutions. And so as we look ahead and knowing that our work is not done, I want to ask you, what are some of the topics, issues, or some of the key components that you would like to know more about, so that we could actually bring those to you as strategies and be able to bring additional presenters, bring new resources, new partnerships. What would you like to learn more about, or what topics are important to you? I handed to you that second sheet I mentioned earlier today. There's a list of some topics that we are providing. However, those are not the topics that we are set with. We would like to hear more from you. And so I would like to go around the room and actually hear also from Sonoma some of the things that your organizations are dealing with. Maybe you're seeing a trend, you're seeing an increase or a spike in client services in a specific area, and you would like to know more about how do I focus on getting more information, or how do I build capacity in a certain area. So why don't we go ahead, and this is something that we'll be using as we strategize for our next year, what topics we'll be working on for you. So who would like to start?
Maybe this is a little different from what you all will say, but I think we touched a little bit on the coalition building, but if we can get into the deeper levels of, if you already have a group, like what to do with them, what next steps, if you already engaged all the stakeholders that you guys talked about, like what are the next planning steps for that? And I mean, we talked a little bit about that with the Spark point, but I mean, like, okay, what's the deeper level within that? Like, what do you do next, or how do you get them engaged, or things like that?
So I'm hearing coalition engagement and retention.
Right.
One of the areas. Okay, great. Thank you. Other topics your agencies or organizations are currently needing some additional information, or topics of interest that you would like the strategists to bring to you in the next year. And Sonoma, if you have any, let us know.
Yes, so I think one that would be very hard to decipher, but is urgent, is housing. So if there's a way to bring information, resources, collaboration, we're seeing the need for housing, and I think that's statewide, but definitely here in Sonoma Valley. I have in my notes also effective collection of data, but I do also see the next webinar, I believe, being around data. So check that out. I think that those are the two main things that are on our mind right now.
Can I ask for clarification? Did you say housing? Is it housing advocacy or housing information on housing programs? What specifically is that?
Yeah.
As a whole, I think that we've been able to do what we can in terms of bringing housing information, eviction, housing rights information. But what else could an organization like ours do to create more opportunities for our families to stay here locally? The biggest fear that we have is that at the end of the day, everybody who we serve will not be able to live in this region. So we are open to all of the above, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Any other, Sonoma, any other ones? Is that the only one? I know that you mentioned data, but that's something that we're covering at our next webinar.
No, I think we got it.
We're good.
So this is Judy Sherman. I just want to see if I can spark your thinking a little bit to answer this question. If you think about advocacy, it's a big, broad term. And there are a lot of different parts to doing advocacy. And one of them is using data to tell your story, or how to maintain membership in coalitions, or how to constituent engagement, involving the residents or your constituents in the work. There's lots of different parts to it. So I'm wondering if, as you think about diving deeper, or as you look at advocacy broadly, and then you think, well, what about this part of advocacy, and what part, and who do I, speaking to power is another element of advocacy. So I'm wondering if there are some of those finer tuned topic areas that might arise for you that we could put on this list.
Can I add to that question? You all hearing me? Yes? Okay. My thought is to Lucy, thanks for earlier guiding us through thinking about our next actions and action plans. My thought is, how can, coming back to this sort of convening a few times in the next year, what can we be talking about and digging into that will help you in your action plans, to help you to bring your advocacy forward? How can this be a boost to what you're trying to do?
This is Beth from First Five Alameda. I am interested in engaging non-traditional partners, people that maybe we don't think about, businesses, Kiwanis, Lions Club, different kinds of parent, YMCA, all the different organizations, even businesses like grocery stores and those kinds of that aren't typically at our tables.
That's exactly what I was saying. I think that's a great point. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
That's a great point, because as we mentioned, we learned in March with the budget in California is that some of our funding streams may not be sustainable for the programs and the initiatives that we're trying to accomplish to support our families. And so we have to look at these non-traditional partnerships. And I am glad you brought up the business sector, because that is, I think Bill mentioned also how they became part of a collaborative with the city to be able to bring new businesses, which will obviously increase the local tax base to support programs.
This is Bill with SparkPoint. And again, building on that idea, particularly getting back to the idea of budget, one thing that we've started thinking about is the upcoming 2020 census, which the results of that are going to have huge impacts on funding for all kinds of agencies and social services. And as we've started thinking about that, recognizing that for a lot of our clients, there is a huge amount of fear around participating in the census and being targeted, particularly with the citizenship question being on there now. And that leaves us struggling with how and to what degree do we encourage census participation when we know it participating could have huge negative impacts for a client, but not participating also has huge negative impacts for them. So we don't have an answer on that, but we're starting to think about looking at the census and how we want to operate around that.
It's a great point. And I know statewide, we are having conversations about how to get the information out to our clients and our residents about, you don't have to answer that question. And the thing about it is the fear factor is still going to be there. And so how do we tackle obviously what's happening, but at the same time, we know that the outcome will be that the less responses, therefore it'll impact also the ability for counties or communities to be able to provide critical services. And so I'm glad, Bill, you brought it up, because the U.S. Census will have an impact, especially in for this next cycle. Okay, any other thoughts? Any other areas that you would like to see in the next? So if we were able to bring these learning opportunities, would it be, for your organization, an investment of your time or your staff time to be able to come? What are these other areas that we could actually support you with? And if this is the list, then we will use this list for our coordination and planning. But any other areas that you would like to see us to bring you? Or speakers? Okay, we have one more person.
I think this was kind of mentioned, but strategies for engaging policy makers, how to approach them, what type of data to share, etc. Local policy makers.
All right, well, thank you for sharing. And I'm not sure if I can be heard online. Okay, thank you for sharing. So we have, for future planning, here's the categories or the topics that have been brought up. Is we want to hear more about how to engage our coalition and how to retain our members so that we can continue working on advocacy efforts, housing options / access, so that we can actually learn more about how these housing options can impact our local communities. The next topic is engaging non-traditional partners in an effort for us to look at sustainability. The next one is the U.S. Census impact and having this dialogue about what is currently occurring and some of the fear factors that can impact our community's future. And then our last one is engaging our local policymakers and how to have a discussion and what to share and how to better prepare to have the discussion. Does that sound good? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take this information and we actually will be working on developing our next 4 convenings, and we will actually be sharing this information with our partners and be able to have speakers that align towards meeting these topics. Okay, so as we close, we actually have shared with you today another building block opportunity that you can add to your advocacy efforts. We are going to be typing up these notes and sending them out to the group so that you can have it for reference. And in closing, I would like to ask if you could actually complete your evaluation and also we have the topics that we also shared with you. Those are suggested topics. However, if there's any additional topics, feel free to add. And then please, if you can leave that as well with us. And so for today's session, if you could share with me, things that you actually will take away with you, some of the positive and some of the deltas or some of the changes that you would like to see for future convenings. So your feedback helps us to continue developing, as we are obviously, this is our first year as a learning community facilitators. So any changes that you would like to see for our next convening, or any things that you actually would like to continue having in future convenings, this is a good time for us to get your feedback. Brenda.
I would say definitely continue integrating the networking and the communicating with your partner or something into the future learning communities, just because it's very helpful to see other perspectives as well. And then you kind of force us to talk rather than us just kind of taking the initiative. And that sometimes that's very helpful for those of us that are a little shyer.
Any other thoughts? Do we have Sonoma?
I think you said that you really like the PowerPoint presentation being printed. That's a positive.
Yes, I really love that. I love when people do that. Thank you. Thank you.
Like the printed slides and so that you can take it with you. Okay. And we will be sending you out all information on behalf of Bill and Fran. Any changes to our convenience? Especially if you've attended before and you. This being your first one. No changes?
Sorry. Hearing more about tangible results from the activities and initiatives and advocacy work or whatever it is. I think our accrediting agency and the other people that we report to that fund us are really interested in outcomes and impact, and I think that's becoming more of a factor recently. And so if we could kind of hear in these examples of, okay, here's A, B, C, then what's either the potential result or results that you've seen or policies that have changed or people's lives that have been impacted, and how do you present that? How do you kind of present those results so that they can be beneficial and lead to more change? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have anything from Sonoma?
I'm sorry. Sonoma, do we have anything to report? Any changes for future convenings or any takeaways that you would like for us to continue doing in our convenings?
Yeah, so I think we were discussing that this was really helpful. I know that the Northern Bay is one of the most recent areas perhaps that you're bringing in community partners towards. So one of the things that would help La Luz and these learning opportunities or trainings with Strategies 2.0 perhaps is to have more outreach so that partners here locally know about Strategies 2.0. And so when they see either the learning communities being promoted or trainings, that they understand that it's a trusted source that's putting them on. So perhaps locally having a representative that does more outreach and connecting with other partners would help us to further this movement that we're creating here in the Northern Bay area.
Great, thank you. Okay. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. And I want to share with you that our next learning convening will be here at First 5 Alameda on October 10th. So please save the date. We will have Katie Albright from Safe and Sound, who will be talking about supporting advocacy through economic impact data, which, as you shared, these are some of the areas that you are interested in learning about how to tell the story through this information, the data component. And so if you, once again, just to remind you, Strategies our website, you can actually register. And so Katie is your executive director, I believe, right? So we actually will be hearing from one of our local partners. And so save the date and hopefully you can join us. And also we also will be taking the information we gather from you today to be able to provide you the next topic for the next meeting, which we'll share with you in October. And so with our final reflection, just want to remind you that the next steps of what we talked about today is really an opportunity for growth, and our communities need our support more than ever. And so we look forward to working with you and growing and developing together, and definitely we'll look forward to seeing you October 10th. And visit us at our website, www.strategyca.org. Also, you can, through social media, you can find us at @strategyca, which you could actually look at some of the posts of what we put from today's convening. And so you can also follow us and continue sharing. And so with that, we want to say thank you for coming, and we appreciate your input. Thank you to Bill and Fran for your time and effort, and Judy for supporting and leading not just today's convening, but also leading such an effort with Fran and Bill's project. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for what you do. We appreciate it. Don't give up. This is a time where our communities need us the most. So thank you, and I hope that today you've connected with someone new, and I look forward to hearing from you as well. Thank you. Have a great day and a safe drive home.
Thank you, Lucy.
And